Quarterback Dante Moore went live on SportsCenter and announced that he will stay at Oregon another year, okay? He is projected to be a top 2 quarterback in this year's draft. All of a sudden, he's not there. And this quarterback class has a massive drop-off. Like, quite frankly, it's one of the worst classes in recent memory here. It's Mendoza and everybody else that in most other classes wouldn't even be looked at as high as they are this year.
The NFL world just exploded. Dante Moore made a decision that has everyone talking, and whether he meant to or not, he just exposed exactly what the league has been hiding about Shedeur Sanders. Look, I'm not saying Dante went on some rant against the NFL, but his actions, they speak louder than any press conference ever could. By choosing to stay at Oregon for another year, Moore just pulled back the curtain on a truth the media doesn't want you to see. They've been downplaying Shedeur's potential this entire time, setting him up to fail and hoping you wouldn't notice. But here's the thing. Moore's decision accidentally just gave Shedeur the biggest gift of his career. And by the end of this video, you're going to see exactly how the NFL's narrative about the 2026 quarterback class was complete BS from the start.
Well, check out this photo, all right, of pressure percentage versus pressure to sack ratio. So the bottom line there, all right, your x-axis, you could see pressure percentage. Shedeur is all the way on the right side. He's getting pressure in his face over 40% of the time. Way more than any other quarterback in this league. However, pressure to sack ratio, right? How many of those pressures become sacks? Well, he's towards the bottom half of the league, all right? A little in between 20 and 25%. So he's getting pressured constantly and more than anyone else, and those pressures are not turning into sacks. That's a credit to his ability to evade pressure.
So let me paint you the picture of what just went down. Yesterday, Oregon quarterback Dante Moore went live on SportsCenter and dropped a bomb that nobody saw coming. He announced he's staying at Oregon for another year. Now, on the surface, you're probably thinking, okay, cool. A college kid wants to develop more before going pro. What's the big deal? Here's the big deal. Dante Moore was projected to be a top 2 quarterback in this year's draft. We're talking about a guy who everyone assumed would be gone, off to the NFL, ready to cash in. And all of a sudden, he's not there. He just removed himself from the equation entirely. And you know what that did? It completely exposed how garbage this 2026 quarterback class really is. Because let me tell you something, this class has a massive drop-off. Like, we're talking one of the worst quarterback classes in recent memory. It's basically Shedeur Sanders and then everybody else who in most other years wouldn't even be getting looked at this high. You've got guys like Carson Beck, who might end up being a 3rd-round pick, depending on what happens in the championship game. Drew Aller's stock is rising out of nowhere, not because he's that good, but because there's literally nobody else. That's the reality of this draft class. And this is where the NFL media has been playing games with you. They've been trying to hype up these other names, trying to make you think there are options out there for teams desperate for a quarterback. But Dante Moore just called their bluff. By staying in school, he basically said, yeah, I could come out and maybe be a top pick, but honestly, this class is so weak that I'd rather bet on myself another year and come out in 2027 when there's actual competition. But here's where it gets really interesting for Shedeur Sanders, and this is what nobody's talking about. For the Cleveland Browns, who are sitting there with the 6th overall pick, this changes everything. Think about it. If you're one of those people who wanted Cleveland to figure out their quarterback situation in the draft, well, that dream just died. There's no way they're getting a top quarterback at 6 now. It would take a haul. We're talking 3 first-round picks to trade up with the Raiders to get that number 1 spot. And let's be real, that's just not happening. It's not worth it for a class this weak. So what does that mean? It means the Cleveland Browns have no other options at the quarterback position. Let's look at free agency real quick. It's pathetic. You've got Joe Flacco, who we already tried, Russell Wilson, who's ancient, Kenny Pickett, who we've seen before and don't want, Marcus Mariota, Aaron Rodgers, if he even wants to play anymore. These are not solutions. These are guys you sign when you've completely given up. The draft? Forget about it. Free agency? A wasteland. So what's left? Shedeur Sanders. And you know what? That's not the disaster the media wants you to think it is. In fact, let me break down why this is actually the best case scenario for both Cleveland and Shedeur, and why Dante Moore's decision just accidentally saved Shedeur's career.
If Shedeur Sanders looks good and we address what we know we need, great. We've got our guy. We figured it out. We're contending. We're winning games. If not, if you draft a lineman, you get a better coach, and it doesn't look good, 2027 has a much better quarterback class than 26. It's not close. It's only Mendoza this year. There's no more Dante Moore. Forget about it. You're going to have to trade 3 first-round picks to get the Raiders to budge with you at number 6.
First things first, we saw positives from Shedeur this season. Real, tangible positives that the talking heads on ESPN refuse to acknowledge because it doesn't fit their narrative. He's a 5th-round pick on a rookie deal. You've got nothing to lose with this kid. You don't have to go out and be a big spender in free agency. You don't have to mortgage your future to trade up. You've got a young quarterback who actually showed flashes of being really good. And let me emphasize something here. Shedeur Sanders made more big plays than any other quarterback on the Browns roster this year. We saw 7 starts from him. 7 starts where he was constantly under siege, constantly having to create something out of nothing, and he still found ways to make plays. But nobody wants to talk about that, do they? Let me show you something that'll blow your mind. There's this chart floating around that shows pressure percentage versus pressure to sack ratio. Stay with me here because this is important. The bottom axis shows pressure percentage, how often a quarterback is feeling heat in his face. Shedeur Sanders is all the way on the right side of that chart. He's getting pressured over 40% of the time. 40%! That's way more than any other quarterback in this entire league. Now, most quarterbacks getting hit that much, they're eating turf constantly. Their sack numbers are through the roof. But here's where it gets interesting. When you look at pressure to sack ratio, meaning how many of those pressures actually turn into sacks, Shedeur is towards the bottom half of the league. He's somewhere between 20 and 25%. You know what that means? It means this kid is getting pressured constantly, more than Patrick Mahomes, more than Josh Allen, more than anybody, and those pressures aren't turning into sacks. That's a direct credit to his ability to evade pressure, to make plays with his legs, to get out of the pocket and extend plays. He showed more mobility than people thought he would have. We saw it with our own eyes. But the NFL media, they don't want you focusing on that. They want you thinking about his interceptions, his mistakes, the games where things went sideways. They don't want to talk about the fact that he was never prepared to be the starter in the first place. And this is where it gets really messed up, so pay attention. Kevin Stefanski didn't pick Shedeur Sanders. That wasn't his guy. His whole plan was to have Jameis Winston as the starter after Joe Flacco, then maybe sprinkle in some Dorian Thompson-Robinson and ride that wave to mediocrity. It was a joke from the start. Anybody who thought that was going to work was delusional.
Otherwise, and then worry about the quarterback. Guys, this organization hasn't been able to find a quarterback for 20 plus years. What makes you think that it's just going to be so simple as, well, hey, let's build the rest of the roster first, and then we'll figure it out? Because here's the thing. If you build the rest of the roster first, theoretically, your team should be better. Then you're the Steelers. You're drafting like 16, 17, 8. Well, I guess they always make the playoffs, so they're always like actually like 20.
Right.
And they never can draft that quarterback because they never have the draft capital or are willing to give the draft capital to get up and get that guy. And so then you're bridging the gap with Russell Wilson.
Next year, Shedeur will actually get reps in a full offseason with Cleveland. Think about that. Training camp reps, OTAs, minicamp, actually throwing to the guys he'll be out there with on game day. You can't tell me that doesn't matter. That's huge for a young quarterback trying to develop timing and chemistry with his weapons. The Browns, and they better do this or heads need to roll, are going to draft and sign a load of offensive linemen. You're going to draft hopefully one of the top offensive line prospects in the first round. Then in free agency, you better be aggressive. The whole offensive line needs a complete revamping. It's been awful, and everybody knows it. Then we're getting a new head coach. Hopefully an offensive-minded head coach who can actually help unleash what Shedeur can do. Because let's keep it real, Kevin Stefanski was holding him back with these ultra-conservative game plans. We watch those games. That's not who Shedeur Sanders is. He likes to make big plays. He likes to push the ball downfield. That's why some of his throws turned into interceptions. He was trying to make something happen when the play design gave him nothing. But that same aggressiveness also led to 40, 50-yard completions that kept drives alive. But here's what the doubters don't understand. Cleveland also lacked another stud wide receiver this season. Jerry Jeudy is not that guy. So bring in a legitimate number one receiver to help out your quarterback. Give him actual weapons to work with. Now, you can't tell me that if all four of these things are addressed in the offseason, offensive line, new offensive-minded coach, full offseason with the team, and another weapon at receiver, that things won't look better. In fact, I guarantee you it'll look much better. Every successful quarterback in today's NFL has a good offensive line. Look around the league at all the success stories. Look at the Colts. Anthony Richardson is showing flashes because he actually has protection. Daniel Jones got revived because he finally has an offensive line in front of him. Sam Darnold looked completely different in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell actually drawing up creative plays. The Bears, with Ben Johnson, making Caleb Williams look better than he probably is. You need a coach who knows what they're doing. You need an offensive line that can give your quarterback more than 1.5 seconds to throw. Cleveland didn't have either of those things this year. So guess what? This is actually best case scenario, and Dante Moore accidentally made it happen. If Shedeur Sanders looks good next year, and we address everything we know we need to address, great. We've got our franchise guy. We figured it out. We're contending for playoff spots. We're winning games in a tough AFC North. If not, if we draft offensive linemen, get a better coach, give him actual weapons, and it still doesn't look good, then the 2027 quarterback class has way more options than 2026. It's not even close. This year, it's basically just Shedeur. There's no Dante Moore anymore. He took himself out of the equation. You'd have to give up multiple first-round picks to move up and get him anyway, and it's not worth it for this weak class.
Kevin, we were saying the exact same thing last year about this year, and then this year's class was like, Arch Manning didn't really come into his own yet, till I guess he played Michigan the other day. Everybody, all the quarterbacks everyone was high on, all kind of fizzled out.
Yeah,
are going back to school, and you're left with Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore. So, we do that every year. We say next year's the year, next year's the year, next year's the year. You can play that game forever if you want to wait. So if the Browns decide they're guys in this class, they have to go get him. But the reason I hate well, it's okay because they need this and they need that and just build up the roster otherwise.
But look at the 2027 class. It's loaded. Dante Moore will be there. Arch Manning will be available. For Ohio State fans, Julian Sayin is an option. Jackson Dart could declare. There are legitimately 10 names that would go higher than half the quarterbacks in this 2026 class. So if Shedeur doesn't pan out, we're not stuck. We'll have premium options to choose from. But here's what I really think is going to happen, and this is where the NFL narrative has been lying to you the entire time. They wanted you to think Shedeur wasn't ready. They wanted you to believe he was a reach, a project, a guy who needed years to develop. Why? Because they didn't want to admit that a fifth-round pick could come in and immediately be better than expensive free agents and high draft picks. Dante Moore staying at Oregon exposed that lie. It showed that this quarterback class is so weak that even top prospects don't want to be part of it, and in doing so, it created the perfect storm for Shedeur Sanders to get a legitimate shot with actual support around him. Think about it. Cleveland finished strong this season. They won their last 2 games against AFC North rivals. They're on a 2-game win streak heading into the offseason. They haven't lost yet in 2026. They're getting a new head coach who hopefully won't be stuck in the 1950s with their play calling. They're going to fix the offensive line. They're going to add weapons. The defense is already top 5 in the league. They're trying to keep Jim Schwartz as defensive coordinator. All the pieces are there except for consistent quarterback play and offensive line protection. Fix those 2 things, and this team can compete. And for everyone who doubted Shedeur, who said he wasn't NFL ready, who claimed he'd never make it, Dante Moore just gave him the gift of time and opportunity. Whether Moore intended it or not, his decision to stay at Oregon removed the pressure for Cleveland to reach on a quarterback in this draft. It gave them permission to actually build around Shedeur the right way, instead of panicking and making a desperate move. So ask yourself this. Was Dante Moore's decision really just about wanting to develop more in college, or did he look at this 2026 class, see that it's basically Shedeur Sanders and a bunch of question marks, and decide he'd rather wait for a better year? Either way, Shedeur just won. The NFL tried to write him off, tried to make you think he wasn't the answer, and Dante Moore just proved they were lying the entire time. Browns fans, I'm actually getting optimistic about 2026, and I know that's dangerous to say, but we've got a young core to build with, a top 5 defense, a new head coach coming in, we're going to draft the offensive linemen we desperately need, we're going to sign the players we need in free agency, and we've got a quarterback in Shedeur Sanders who already showed he can make plays when everything around him is falling apart. So tell me in the comments, are you feeling optimistic about Shedeur getting a real shot next year? Do you think Dante Moore staying at Oregon actually helped Shedeur's chances? And who do you want as the next head coach for Cleveland? Drop your predictions down below. If you made it this far, hit that subscribe button, because we're covering every single move this team makes this offseason. The coaching search is heating up, free agency is coming, and the draft is going to be massive for this franchise. Let's ride this out together, Browns fans. I'll see you in the next one.